have to repeat myself then. So good morning. I would like to start the subcommittee, and I need to call this subcommittee meeting to order. And I will have to read through the document as you are aware. So bear with me. Generally, public bodies are prohibited from meeting electronically under the provisions of the Freedom of Information Act. However, emergency language provided by the Governor and General Assembly in April allows us to move forward with certain restrictions that I will outline below. Before I review those provisions, please let me take a moment to review how this meeting will work. We want to allow for participation of subcommittee members, staff, and members of the public who wish to comment. However, it is essential that we are able to manage the conversation effectively. While the meeting will be open for subcommittee comments, due to the challenges associated with an electronic meeting, we want to allow members of the public to be heard. If you would like to make a comment, please do so in the chat box. Shui Zhang will be monitoring the chat box and let us know when someone has submitted a comment. We will address your comments as time allows. Please be patient with us as we work through this. We understand and appreciate the challenges. Again, I have to read a lengthy introduction of our virtual meeting. This is long, but this is required to be read out loud under Chapter 1289 for electronic meetings. Chapter 2189 of the 2020 Act of Assembly, also known as the Budget Bill, includes language addressing the ability of public bodies to conduct electronic meetings without the need for a quorum being present in a single physical location. This language was submitted as an amendment by the Governor and approved by the General Assembly at the April 22nd, 2020 reconvened session. The Governor subsequently signed the Budget Bill, and the bill was effective as of July 1st, 2020. The Budget Bill allows public bodies to hold electronic meetings when the Governor has declared a state of emergency pursuant of paragraph 44, 146, .17 if the nature of the declared emergency makes it impractical or unsafe for the public body or governing board to assemble in a single location, or the purpose of the meeting is to discuss or transact the business statutory required or necessary to continue operations for the public body and the discharge of its lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. The Budget Bill also has language regarding recordings and transcription of electronic meetings. Please be advised that this meeting is being recorded. This recording will be available to the public through the SNR webpage. The comments in the chat room will also be preserved as a public record. Official minutes of these meetings will be drafted and posted in accordance with regular procedures. The minutes will also include the type of electronic communication means by which this meeting is being held, which in this case is WebEx. The Budget Bill does not allow the subcommittees to hold an electronic meeting to discuss or transact business of any purpose. Rather, they may do so as long as the agenda items that the public body plans to take up are A, statutory required, or B, necessary to continue operations and discharge lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. If it is the committee's responsibilities to determine whether the committee's responsibility to determine whether the nature of the declared emergency makes it impractical or unsafe for the public body or governing board to assemble in a single location. At the conclusion of my remarks, I will ask for a motion for the subcommittee to make this determination. If that motion fails, the electronic meeting will end at that point. The Budget Bill requires compliance with the provisions of paragraph 2.237808.2. Therefore, in accordance with 2.2-3708-2.D.2, public bodies must include a telephone number that may be used to notify the public body of any interruption of the telephonic or video broadcast of the meeting. In the event that an interruption occurs, participants should contact Shui Zhang by phone or text at 217-979-8438, and I asked Shui to put her number also in the chat box. Thank you. Additionally, if there's an interruption in the broadcast, the meeting must be suspended until public access is restored. Those provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act not addressed by the budget bill remain in effect. Before we continue with the business portion of this meeting, I will call the roll for the subcommittee members and anticipated staff. Other participants will be recorded through the chat window. Again, if you're participating by phone and your name is not called, please call Shurui Zhang at 217-979-8483. In addition, if any time you lose connections or unable to connect, please contact Shurui under the given number. So I'm doing the roll call now. So please, for those of you I call, please unmute yourself and make yourself known. Let's start with Elizabeth Andrews is not here at the moment. Jessica Granis. Dr. Karl Hirschner.
Present.
Whitney Kaczmark.
Here.
Dr. Mark Lukenbach.
Here.
Catherine McGee.
Here.
Karen McClathery. Dr. Karen McClathery. My apologies.
Yep, present.
Ashley Montgomery. Mary Carson Stiff or William Skip Stiles.
We're both present.
Carlos Rivero. Dr. Rob Young.
Present.
And Emily Steinhelber.
Present.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Me, it's 10. We have quorum. So then I will now, so since we have quorum, we can continue. And this is, I will now present a recommended motion and wait for a committee member to request a motion. And the motion is as follows. The subcommittee certifies that the nature of the declared COVID-19 emergency makes it impractical or unsafe for the board to assemble in a single location, and further, that the agenda items to be taken up at this meeting are necessary to continue operations and discharge lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities of the board. Do I hear a motion?
So moved. This is Mark.
A second?
Second, Rob Young.
Thank you very much. We do a similar roll call with your intended vote on proceeding. Let's see. Let's start with Dr. Karl Hirschner.
Aye.
Whitney Kaczmark. Oh, she wasn't here.
Aye.
Oh, yeah. Dr. Mark Lukenbach.
Aye.
Catherine McGee.
Aye. Aye. Sorry.
Dr. Karen McClathery.
Aye.
Ashley Montgomery. Can you repeat that, please?
Aye.
Mary Carson Stiff.
Aye.
Dr. Rob Young.
Aye.
Emily Steinhelber.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. That passes the motion. So we can continue with our meeting. I want to further explain how we will handle participation of this by subcommittee members, staff, and the public. Everyone except the individual presenting materials for an agenda item will be muted. Once the presentation is completed, the subcommittee members and only subcommittee members will be unmuted for discussion and may indicate their desire to comment by raising their hand and commenting in the chat box. The button to do that is right under the participants list. So just for you guys to note. Staff will assist me with ensuring subcommittee members are recognized when they have questions or comments. As needed, staff will be unmuted to address questions or concern. Members of the public will be able to ask questions and provide input by utilizing the chat box function only. As time allows, we will respond to those questions and comments in the chat function. Public comments will be taken from those who signed up in advance during the last 30 minutes of the meeting. We will proceed now with the business of the subcommittee as outlined in the agenda. Before I do that, I would like to give Ann Phillips the floor to address the subcommittee.
Yes, good morning. Yep, I'm coming in.
You're breaking up, Ann.
He's in a participant list. Matt is has recently joined us through DCR. He will be slowly. And I will turn off my camera, which might help. Okay. I want to introduce Matt Dallin, who is on the call, working with us to oversee the contract once we are able to award. So you will be seeing him and you will be hearing from him and working with him as we move forward with the contract. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to introduce him this morning. Thank you very much, Robert.
Thank you, Ann. Shuri, can you put up the presentation or the slides? Okay, so yeah, looking at the agenda before we move on, this is the presented agenda for today. The items that we need to look at are the working groups, and I have 3 topics that I would like to suggest. Structure, SOP, next steps, and then as a 4th topic, the advisor or presenter list, and then as a number 5 is public comments, and number 6, I forgot to put in there, unfortunately, that there between the public comment and the advisor list, there is a discussion point. For some reason that this doesn't make it in here, I apologize. Given the number 6 being a discussion between advisor and the items advisor and presenter list and public comments, do I hear a motion to approve the agenda? Troy, could you just please take it off and then add a discussion point between 4 and 5 as an additional list, briefly? I apologize. It's on it's on slide 4. I just didn't make it on the first slide. Discussion, yeah, perfect. Okay, all right. Do I hear a motion to approve this agenda?
This is Kathy McGee, so moved.
Do I have a second?
Second, this is Emily.
Thank you very much. For those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, here none, the agenda is approved. The next item is very briefly your approval of the minutes. Is there any, I approve do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. This is Mark.
Second?
Second, this is Emily.
Thank you. Do we have to have a discussion about the minutes? Hearing none, I will assume unanimous consent and the minutes are approved. So if you go please to the next slide, Shuri, that'd be great. So we're talking now about working groups. So I've spoken with some of you, or most of you actually, over the phone, and some of you simply hadn't had the chance to connect. But what I heard in the discussion with you, there were 3 topics that sort of emerged. Oh, my dog is eating socks. I'm sorry. Sorry, guys. There were 3 topics that emerged from this discussion, and that was relocation handbook is an important topic. Then another one was nature-based infrastructure. And then a third topic was socioeconomic equity or inequity, if you like. So in this regard, we need to come up with these working groups and focus on these topics. And I put here a few sort of example question or focuses that what I can think of that we should do, and that is for the relocation handbook. We need to look out there what is done in other states and areas like LA Safe or Texas or Blue Acres and so forth, and then list those solutions that they do in other areas or have implemented in other areas, and see how they are applicable to Virginia. And in this regard, I'd like to say when I do a literature review, so this is compared to perhaps a literature review that we would do in academia, I usually tell my students to be very specific and ask questions. So for example, I would do a spreadsheet that has a specific, would list the specific solutions, and then very quickly provide the ability to see as to whether this would be something relevant for us or not. Because I want to prepare for the next task, which is then to evaluate as to whether a solution is applicable. For natural and nature-based infrastructure, example question or focuses could be to collect existing solutions. Is there anything missing? Under what conditions they are appropriate, workable, in what circumstances they would provide these nature-based solutions or could adapt to future conditions. And for socioeconomic equity, what data do we need to measure socioeconomic equity or equality or inequality in the Commonwealth? What are the pitfalls of that, and do we need an inventory or not? What I wanted to say, these are example questions or focuses. I would like to give these working groups the authority to chart their own path in collaboration with the chair or the co-chair, so that they can find maybe opportunities to give quick advice and recommendations to the Commonwealth early on in the process instead of later. I would like to open the floor for discussions now on this topic. For those of you who have a comment, please raise your hand, and we can discuss the working groups. I see Rob Young.
So I like the three working groups that you have here, Rob. I just have one question, and I apologize that I got my information back to you a little bit late. I have literally spent the last 10 days in underwater communities in Horry County, South Carolina, where the Waccamaw and the PD have set records again during the last week or so. I'm wondering if there might be one other topic that might be a separate working group or included in one of these. And again, I apologize for adding this at this point, but it seems to me that it might also be incredibly valuable to all aspects of resilience planning if some group chimed in on best practices in conducting vulnerability assessments and hazard assessments, both at the parcel level and at the community level. There are a tremendous number of products out there right now. Everything from what the First Street Foundation is working on with realtors.com to lots of different NOAA products and sea level rise viewers. And I mean, there's just so much out there right now that one might utilize to try and understand the hazards at any given location. I think it might be extremely helpful for some group to take a look at all of those products and to evaluate them for their rigor. This would also include the FEMA flood insurance rate maps, by the way, and provide some guidance as to what folks in the Commonwealth should be using. It would be nice to limit the products so that we're not getting results that are all over the place. And so that's just a thought that I'm throwing out there. I don't know if that's appropriate to discuss right now, but and I'm not positive that that's appropriate for our committee. And I'm curious, Anne, whether you think that's being covered somewhere else and whether you think that would be useful. Now I'm muting.
Any comment regarding the proposed fourth topic that Rob just announced, or any of the other topics? Carl?
I agree with what Rob is saying. I think looking at kind of the existing databases that are out there and kind of pulling from those processes will help us flesh out a lot of these questions that you've framed for us. And I think it's going to help us tie into the other working groups. Like, I understand Rob's point of, I don't know if it particularly pertains to this group, but I think us understanding that content will help us inform the project evaluation team on meeting back.
Thank you, Ashley. Carl?
So a contrary opinion, while I agree that it will be most useful to have some assessment of all the various assessments that are available, the challenges that the TAC and the whole process of master planning is going to confront within the next 9 months or sooner is to get things moving. And there has already been quite a bit of work, as Rob has outlined, in looking at hazard assessment, risk assessment protocols. There are already a lot of them being used by local governments and regional planning districts. And while I think ultimately there is going to be a need for some evaluation of comparability across the things, for the first year of this entire process, I think we're going to be basically moving with whatever people are currently using. And in fact, going through the first 1 or 2 iterations is probably going to inform the question that Rob is asking, which is, what are the protocols that are being used? And then we'll have a basis for moving forward with an assessment of those. So I agree that it's important. I just think that it's biting off a bit more than this small group can handle at this point of the process.
This is
Mary Carson, please.
I think that it might be helpful if the state was willing to weigh in on what kinds of models and data they believe would be helpful to use. This is an instance where state consistency should probably be the goal, with some regional variability. For example, the state's VFRIS, Virginia Flood Risk Information System, was developed by the state in concert with the Virginia Institute of Marine Science and forms Virginia's version of a North Carolina tool, and has the FEMA flood maps with some Virginia parcel data to come. So I don't know, I just think it'd be good if the state could provide some direction.
Before we continue, could Rob, Carl, and MC please lower your hand so I can keep track, because they're popping up and then I don't know if you have another question. Maybe before we let's continue. Mark.
Yes, I want to start with a question for Rob, and it maybe relates back to what Carl's point was. Rob, were you proposing that this working group would be making recommendations for how risk assessment would be done in the future beyond this 9-month deadline we've got, or literally making a recommendation for what risk assessment tool the offerer, the firm that we contract with, would be using? Because I think that speaks to what Carl was saying. And maybe another part of that, and a piece of that question maybe goes to Admiral Phillips as well, in terms of given where we are in the process of hiring, making a decision about hiring a firm, and they've brought in their proposals, some tools and ideas forward with them. That's why I'm trying to understand what the recommendations are about, how we move forward immediately, or it's a good bit of work to say what types of tools would be recommended in the future.
Shall I answer that question? So sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead before we move on. Yes.
I guess I'm not sure which I was envisioning. You know, I think that this could be done in a way that doesn't necessarily require a ton of work. I think if it is not easily available for the Commonwealth, it would be very helpful to pull together at least lists of data sources and products that are out there, and maybe some guidance on who's using what. You know, we work with localities all the time who are trying to get started in doing hazard assessments, and most of them have a tremendous amount of difficulty understanding where to start and what the limitations are. And many then just default to using theme of firms, which in my mind is absolutely not the ideal product to use to understand your community's exposure to hazards. So, you know, I'm just thinking that what we would be providing, if appropriate, would be, you know, at the very least, sort of a summary of the data products that folks are currently using. And if we don't have time at this point to go through an evaluation of all of them, then that would be fine. But you know, at least to make sure that we have an inventory, and I think that would inform what's going on now and the future. But you know, ideally, at some point there would be a good evaluation and consideration to help guide localities for what to choose in the future.
Thank you, Rob. Emily?
So to follow up on what you have all said and what Rob just said, I think that we've all seen and understand the challenges that localities and PDCs have in determining which sources are best for which purposes. Considering the large scope of some of these initial questions, would it be fair, and I think this is not going to be the first really good question to come up and really good need, maybe we start establishing a to-do list parking lot now, and this is in that parking lot at the top, and we figure out as the consultant comes on board and as we move forward in the next 60 days, how to refine and frame that question. I think one of the things that Robert mentioned at the outset was that the idea is that these working groups, you know, they answer a question and then we shuffle and move on and answer the next question and form additional groups. And this could be a great place to start, you know, what's our next question? Just a thought.
Thank you, Emily. Before I go to the next one, I just want to draw your attention to a comment in the chat that was to everyone from Mary Carson Stiff. And the two comments actually, using a state standard could be included as a requirement of what constitutes an adequate local flood risk under the community flood fund. Second, I agree with Mark's comments. Isn't this one on the consultant to determine what models/tools should be used, and that will hopefully create a state standard. Then Whitney Kutchmark said agreed with the overlaps with CFPF requirements. I see Karen McClattery's hand up.
Yeah, I think Mary addressed my comment in the chat. I think I completely agree with her that we should move towards having a state standard. And I agree with Carl that this is probably not the time to do all the full analysis, but if we can start with a state recommendation and move from there, I think that's the best strategy.
Thank you. Emily and Karen, since you Emily, can you lower your hand? And I want to call on Admiral Phillips to give her opportunity to comment on this discussion. Unless she chooses not to, or she has technical problems. If that is the case, Whitney Kutchmark.
I think we were, thank you, hoping that the state would just establish some basic like guidelines on what should be assessed, not necessarily dictate a tool. So I don't know if that's that much different than what everyone else is thinking. I think if the state provides an assessment through the consultant, that's great. But for those localities that have done something more detailed, hopefully that would align and be complementary.
Thank you, Whitney. Any other comments regarding Rob Young's additional working group or thought of working group? Kathy McGee?
I think at a minimum that we need to make sure the evaluation subcommittee has this on their radar screen. Perhaps they have more bandwidth within their what they have on their work list right now. I don't know. I'm on that subcommittee too, but I'm not sure. But it seems like evaluation becomes really even more challenging if you don't start from a common place. And without some sort of guidelines, you lose that common place.
Carl?
So very quickly, in speaking of the evaluation subcommittee, it is sort of on our radar, but no, we don't have the bandwidth to deal with it right now. And we are confronted with the, while Whitney was cautious in her comment, I can hear in my head other PDCs and localities screaming much more loudly that, hey, we're partway down this path and we've got a real short timeline to respond, so we're not going to be able to change course at this point. I suspect, as you've just heard, they're all interested in some consistency and guidance going forward, but in the near term, I don't know that anybody's going to be able to tackle this issue right now.
Thank you, Carl. Any other comments? Mark?
Yeah, just a question, and maybe again, rather than recommendations, could a partial place to go is to consider that we recommend that one of the products that the consultant do isn't a recommendation necessarily, but like Rob talked about, it's that table that lists the tools out there and maybe lists strengths and weaknesses. Now we don't negotiate directly with the consultant, but we could certainly make that as a recommendation to Admiral Phillips and Secretary Strickler that the consultant do that inventory work with some commentary about it.
Yeah. Carl, did you have your hand up again, or is it just a?
I did. Real briefly, one of the things that is going to be part of the evaluation, and this is not the evaluation subcommittee, but the entire pack, and looking at projects, is a requirement that those projects look at critical infrastructure, and that has not been defined anywhere. And part of what we're anticipating is that there will be a need for us to be responsive to what both the contractor and localities have identified as what they consider to be critical infrastructure. And so once we get there, then we'll be in a better position to look at risk assessment protocols and consistency in those.
Thank you, Carl. So what I'm hearing is that while this is an important topic, it's not clear how we should proceed as to whether, because it seems to me that we need to let the contractor come on board and see and work with the contractor to see what is necessary there, given the difference in where planning districts are in these efforts and so forth. So maybe that's an opportunity for us to look at that maybe later and do what Emily suggested, create a parking lot and put it as a high priority in a parking lot sort of thing. Are there any discussions about the working groups as they are listed here in 311, 312, and 313? I hear, if I take that silence as as there are no critical points, if you feel that these are important topics, which your silence, I would assume your silence tells me that, and perhaps the need to address the working group or the topic that Dr. Rob Young has mentioned earlier, to pick that up later. Maybe I would entertain a motion to approve the relocation handbook, the natural and nature-based infrastructure, and the socioeconomic topic as to adopt as 3 different working groups that we form under the subcommittee. Do I hear a motion to do that?
So moved. This is Carl.
Do we have a second?
Second, this is Karen McGlathery.
Thank you, Karen. Rob, you had your hand up. This is the time to have any additional discussions before we vote.
Okay. Not trying to be troublesome. Just wondering if we should broaden the natural and nature-based infrastructure portion just a bit to, to include solutions to coastal flooding and erosion, rather than just narrowly looking at natural and nature-based infrastructure, which I understand is a priority for everybody to use green infrastructure where possible. But I'm wondering if this topic shouldn't be just a little bit broader, where our group is actually maybe going to make up recommendations where we draw the line between using gray infrastructure and green infrastructure, and how one might approach that decision making, and what the benefits and drawbacks are for each. And that might be a slightly more informative and helpful to everybody else. And believe me, for those of you who know me, I'm not an advocate for gray infrastructure, but there certainly will be places where that's what we're going to use. And so maybe we should just broaden that second one just a bit. Thoughts?
Whitney?
I like that idea. I think as an advisory committee, it would be helpful to have some additional input than just the consultant making that call, since I think it will be difficult. Thanks.
Carl?
This topic, the topic that Rob mentions, is very much on the minds of the evaluation subcommittee, which Rob will learn shortly. If we tackle that, I would suggest that rather than letting it anastomose into a review of all possible risk reduction strategies, that what's really going to be necessary in the near term is some rationale for evaluating the temporal scale at which some of these strategies can provide meaningful reduction to critical infrastructure. So the project evaluation will be necessarily asking the question whether proposed gray infrastructure or proposed relocation or proposed natural infrastructure is going to produce risk reduction over a meaningful time period, and deciding how one takes a look at that and or what a meaningful time period might be is going to be a pressing question.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with that. So the name I put down is based on the living shoreline, and in my opinion, this includes as to whether other mitigation measures in gray or hybrid ways need to be employed. So that is part of it. But I agree. Maybe the subcommittee, the working group as it forms, can rename itself and define a meaningful name for that, if that's okay with you guys. For me, it's totally in the scope of this to evaluate as to whether we need to have other mitigation measures in place. That's why I put this under which condition are they appropriate for, as an example, and then what is appropriate if they're not. So for me, this is all part of that. Is that would that be an okay way forward for this particular working group to define the name as well as what falls under it later in the next step? And I really think that for me personally, the committee, the subgroups or the working groups can define in collaboration with us, with Emily and myself, sort of what they are, what is the most important task next? Are there any low-hanging fruits that could be looked at that would make it possible to make the interaction with the offerer, with the consulting firm that will come aboard very effective, as well as provide early recommendation to the state. Okay, so I feel like that's under the purview of those groups to do so. Okay. In this regard, if that's okay, Whitney, do you still have a comment? Just no, okay. If that is okay, I would like to. We have the motion. We have a second. We had a discussion. I would like to proceed with the vote to establish these three subgroups, and I want to call on Dr. Karl Hirschner.
Aye.
Whitney Kaczmark. Okay, hearing nothing, we go back to it. Mark Lukenbach.
Aye.
Kathleen McGee.
Aye. Aye.
Dr. Karen McClattery.
Aye.
Ashley Montgomery.
Aye.
Mary Carson Stiff.
Aye.
Dr. Robert Young.
Aye.
Emily Steinhilber.
Aye.
Let's try Whitney Kaczmark one more time.
Aye.
Okay, and I vote aye too. So the motion passed. So we will have these three subcommittees, and then have further discussions later on about the topic that Rob Young suggested. Can we move forward to the next slide, please? We need to move on a little bit because we have only 15 minutes left. So sort of structure and SOPs, we need to find about 4 members in each subcommittee or more. That's the minimum. As Emily hinted, I'm not married to these subcommittees until the end of time. If we need to reshuffle things, depending on the task, I want to be nimble as a subcommittee with these working groups so we can address needs more effectively. That may also arise working in the early days, working with a contractor, or after we establish more efficient communication with other subcommittees. We need to appoint, each of the groups need to appoint a point person so that I or Emily can communicate with that person due to COIA and FOIA regulations. And again, here the working groups have authority, and especially when it comes to a list of advisors. Again, we need to observe FOIA guidelines. If you have any questions about that, we can bring someone from the Attorney General's office in for our next meeting to give a 10-minute highlight of what is important there. The specific tasks that you pick up as a working group, I would do that in collaboration with me so that I know what's going on. I would expect that updates, even if brief, would be done at the next subcommittee meetings in 4 weeks. And sort of like how I see this, and we can maybe discuss that in our discussion portion, is I would like to what comes out of the working groups to be consensus-based rather than by majority vote, and then we can decide, we can see how that goes in our subcommittee, and if we can reach consensus about certain recommendations, especially, you know, when working groups want to make recommendations, how that passes through. And I would like to have that that recommendations are brought to the subcommittee as a consensus rather than a majority kind of item. Okay. The next steps are Shurui Zhang will send out an email with an sort of a Google form that looks very similar to what Anne has sent out earlier when we signed up for subcommittees, that gives you a ranking of which working group you would like to participate in. And you can participate in more than one, obviously, and as to whether you would like to be the point person for that subcommittee or so. And then Emily and I will look at that and hopefully have an easy decision to do that. If we can advance to the next section, to the next slide, Shirui. The advisor list. I really appreciate all your input for the advisors and potential speakers. We have more than 35 now, or way more than that now, as potential speakers and advisors. So we could have we could from now until November have a weekly seminar series, which we're not going to have, obviously. But I was thinking maybe having, starting next time, one, maybe two speakers doing each of the subcommittee meetings to present short 15 to 20 minute presentations, depending on how this shapes up. Next time we probably have to use the full 90 minutes that we have scheduled. So officially our meeting goes from 11 to 12:30. Once we have speakers and respective discussions, then probably we will need the extra 30 minutes next time, starting next time. And I think maybe at the moment priority is given to the relocation topic, but we can discuss that. And I don't know why this last group is here again. Again, as a working group, you need to maybe I will share the list with speakers with you, and then you can amend or comment or edit that list accordingly. I would like to move to item 5 now. Is there any discussion of any of what I've said or feedback that you would like to provide at this point about any of the topics that were discussed after the vote to establish these groups? I see Dr. Karen McLaughlin, please.
Yeah, Robert, could you just clarify how the different subgroups are going to interact? Is it just going to be occasionally we'll do report outs to the whole committee, or are there other ways that you're going to formalize some communication across the subcommittees?
Yeah, so this is where it becomes tricky. If you recall the FOIA requirement, if you sent emails to more than 2 members of the subcommittee, we have to be very careful how we structure that in order to comply with that FOIA, with the Freedom of Information Act. So it's a really difficult. It's not easy to do that, and that's why I would like to have a point person, so that and then I can be the node in there, or you can reach out to other subcommittee point people to start a conversation on a one-on-one basis. We just need to be careful about the committee, about the FOIA, about the Freedom of Information Act. However, if you wish to do so, and Shirui is there to help us with that, if you would like to have a meeting, we just need to publicly announce that and have it properly recorded. We can do that as well. We just have to be careful about those things. If you are in a subcommittee and you really feel the need that it's necessary that you have a meeting with a larger group, we just put it on the calendar and have the meeting such as we have this.
I just wonder if it makes sense to deliberately have a person who's on more than one working group, so that you can communicate across the working groups in an acceptable, formal way that doesn't just rely on reporting to the whole subcommittee.
Right. I would. So we have 13 or 14 members here. I would like to see, if I may say that, I would like to see that the minimum number is 4, right? Because that's what we need for quorum and the FOIA Act and so forth. But if there would be more members, let's say 10, that would make it easier, because then the cross-pollination between subcommittees is pretty high. So the cross-section of them is pretty high. And then the likelihood of being informed what is going on in other, not subcommittees, working groups is pretty large, right? So so that is done in an informal way by member, by member participation. That would be my preference. Yes. Any other comment? Okay, hearing none, I would invite, sorry?
Sorry, Robert, this is Mary Carson.
Yeah.
I think that, one thing that we've been thinking a lot about is what our deliverables are. And I know this is something that we talked about, but maybe it would be useful to have a conversation as the whole committee. I think it's really confusing to know what kinds of responsibilities we have in terms of, deliverable to the greater TAC and to the consultant writing the plan and to one another. And so I think that, maybe a little bit of information about what kinds of requirements or deadlines or format for deliverables.
Yeah. So yeah, that is an excellent question. And, this question came up a lot talking to individuals of the subcommittee. And that is where perhaps the biggest uncertainty still exists. In my opinion, and that's just my opinion, our job is to provide advice to the Commonwealth that is based solely or foundationally in science. So if I, for example, look at the National Nature-Based Infrastructure Group, I would say a deliverable is the recommendation on what do we need to, what are the basic conditions for nature-based infrastructure to be efficient over a certain period of time. And obviously we need to learn that what this period of time is in a given region or in a given locality. So I think that would be a product. So for example, if this, are we looking at 10 years? Are we looking at 5 years? And then one cannot expect that certain nature-based infrastructure is effective over this period of time. So based on science, that recommendation is important. For relocation, just quote unquote, just a table of solutions of what is out there is not necessarily a recommendation, but can help those who will have to write the relocation handbook from a policy point of view, which is the coastal zone management group, will help those folks to make those or to create those policy. It is my intent later to bring in those who are affected by our policies or will have to, not policies, recommendations, or will have to take those recommendations into account, like the planning districts or localities or CZM. As you will notice that Shep Moon was a member of this committee, but he's been removed since, simply because for the fact that it is easier to communicate with him as an advisor than as a member, because of his group is responsible for actually writing the relocation handbook from a policy perspective. So to help him, we will engage with him, and that group, that working group has to engage with him and learns what this group needs, and what would be most helpful, and that's what I think. That's what we need to follow. I think we cannot just generalize. General say what is a deliverable or what is a recommendation in this regard. It depends a lot on what the needs are, and for the general topics, I can see some recommendations that we can make for the nature-based natural or nature-based group. For relocation, it would be in collaboration with Chat Moon and CZM, and maybe perhaps the planning districts, to see what the needs are. Maybe that communication needs to take place. And for the socioeconomic group, maybe getting together or establish communication with the outreach subcommittee might be a good idea to see where where we can start. Furthermore, as a last point I wanted to make, we also need to see what the contractor does, because we need to evaluate their work and ensure that they are working in the right directions. So that might also be, at least for the short term, be part of these subcommittees, depending on if the contractor work is focused in either of the three areas. I will try to get more clarity. I will continue to try to get more clarity on that as we move forward. Any other comments? Hearing none, are there any members of the public who would like to make a comment? Shurui, are there any? Have there been signups?
Rob Young has his hand up. Oh.
Oh, Rob. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Rob.
This is just a quick procedural question. If there's a document or a study or something like that that we're interested in sharing with the rest of the committee, how do we do that these days? I assume we can't just start emailing things to everybody. Do we send it to you, Rob?
No, how you do that is very simple. You will send this to me and put the rest of the subcommittee in as planned copy.
Okay.
This is Emily. I believe that we all received a copy of the contact information for everyone serving on the TAC and on the subcommittees. If you did not, we can make sure that you do have that, but just to keep in mind not to accidentally have a meeting on email. So that's why the blind copy comes in handy.
Yeah, so because if you hit reply all, you just would email me in this regard, right? You wouldn't be able to accidentally blind copy or reply to all. If you have not participated in the FOIA and COIA sort of training that we had earlier, it was very interesting to hear that it seems to be 4 hours between replies. If you have to email more than one person, please, for those who are engaged in this email, it seems to be that 4 hours between replies does not qualify as a conversation and subcommittee business. But if you email me and blind copy everybody, there is now a web page that has all the members of the subcommittee listed, and perhaps I will share I don't know if there are emails associated there, but I can share a Google Sheet or send that around with everybody so you can at least see that. Anne has updated that list, so it will continue to update as we move forward, I presume. So that might be the way. So planned copying is the way. And please do that if you have anything that you would like to share with the rest of the subcommittee. Just use that vehicle. Send it to me and put everybody else as in blind copy. Okay? Don't be hesitant to do that.
And another option, if you are not able to do that, is that Shuri Zhang, our assigned staff person, is always able to help. So you could always email her with a question or ask her to share with the group.
That's correct. Thank you, Emily. All right. Interesting to learn, Rob, that your state doesn't have any rules. Any other public comments? Hearing none.
Comment. Oh, sorry. If you have a comment, you can raise your hand. I can mute you.
Yes, please raise your hand. Or for those who can't, please put your comment in the chat box, and I will ensure we can address those. Okay.
It doesn't seem that we have any comments.
Thank you, Shurui. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved. This is Emily.
A second?
Second, this is Mary Carson.
Thank you very much. For those in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed and wants to continue this discussion? Hearing none, I adjourn this meeting. Sharui will send out the reminder for the next meeting. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
You all.